Hayley from Ritual Oils of Birth here, and today we're going to talk contractions. What do they feel like? What does labour look like? And what is my body trying to do? And this was one of the biggest questions I had prior to experiencing labour for myself. And that was, what would contractions feel like? You hear so much about people and their experiences, but it's really hard to put into words what it feels like. And that is because labour is experienced differently by different people, because it's not just it's not a concrete feeling that everyone feels the same way. How you are prepared for labour will have an impact on how it will feel. How well you're prepared is a massive part of labour. What position your baby's in, what position you're in, whether you're active and upright. Those sorts of things can have a massive impact on labour, and that's why it feels different for everyone. So I can only speak from my own experience of labouring 3 times, and also caring for women in labour in my time working on the wards as a midwife. So let's talk about what is a contraction. Now, what your body's trying to do in labour is to open the cervix, which is closing your baby in at the bottom. Open that cervix to allow baby to come through your pelvis. And how that happens is through the muscles of your uterus. So your uterus is a big ball of muscles that encases your baby in the waters and everything. It's amazing. It has several muscle layers going in different directions, and these muscles are super strong. Now, at the bottom of your uterus is that cervix, and that's closed tight for most people during pregnancy. And it's a firm boundary for your baby. Now, the beginning of labour is this early phase, and if it's your first baby, early labour can be quite a long period of time. That's when your cervix is starting to shorten and join the rest of your uterus, because it starts out a bit like the neck of a balloon, and gradually it gets shorter and shorter and shorter. As you can imagine, blowing up a balloon, the neck of it comes up, and then it starts to open. And how that happens is regular, consistent, intense tightening of the muscles of your uterus, pulling up to the top where your fundus is, pulls right up to the top and pulls the bottom open. And that's generated by hormones from your brain acting on your uterus, and this bit of a feedback system between your baby's head hitting the cervix, and it continues. Now, again, the position of your baby can have a bearing on this, and how active you are in labour can have a bearing on this as well. So for me, during my first labour, I had fairly long early labour phase, and that's before your cervix gets to about 3 to 4 centimetres. That's the beginning of labour. And for me, it was started with a few gradual increasing contractions that felt a lot like period pain. They were mainly low down in my uterus, so felt in that lower region, as often period pain is. And sometimes it can radiate around your back, and that can be a sign of labour as well. Some women feel it majority in their back. I had one woman once who'd felt like she'd just had a bit of back pain, but came in, and when by the time she was in, she was sort of 8 centimetres, and hadn't even realised she was in labour, but it was in her back. And that can be, again, due to baby's position. So for me, these contractions started with sort of irregular, not very strong. They were sort of a bit like this, bit of a blip, maybe a stronger one, then a big break, and then maybe a little one. And they sometimes can stop entirely, and that's when it's sort of an early labour phase. There's nothing regular about them, no regular intensity, no regular duration. One might last a minute, one might last 20 seconds. That's generally the pattern of when early labour starts for women having their first babies. Second babies are a little different. Generally, you sometimes bypass this section, or it's very short, and you go straight into something that's a little more regular. When your labour is in an active phase, what your uterus will be doing is regular. It will be increasing in intensity, and the contractions will be increasing in duration. And they're the ones that will be generally doing the most work to open that cervix. And that's why if you ring up your maternity ward with a query whether you're in labour or not, if you're able to breathe through your contractions, they're not particularly regular, they're not lasting a great deal. That's why most often the advice would be to stay at home until you're in the active phase, when they are like this. So 1, rise and fall, rise and fall, rise and fall. And generally they will be about 2 minutes apart, and they'll last for around 60 seconds. Around 60 seconds. Again, it's different for everyone. Sometimes when you're having your second or subsequent babies, you might have a lot less contractions than this and your uterus is working more efficiently. So it's different for everyone, again, as I said. But this is generally the early pattern when things are starting to heat up. And generally, if you have to ask yourself, am I in labour? You're not quite there. And it's generally not the time that you want to start. You don't need to start timing things, really. You'll know when you get to this active phase because you'll be at a point where you have to concentrate during this section and your partner's jokes won't be funny anymore and you'll need them to shut the hell up. So you'll know when you're in active labour. Now, with a contraction, and I'll probably draw this a bit bigger so it's a bit more obvious, but let's do it like this. Now, this is the sort of the best representation I can give you for how a contraction works. What it does, it's a gradual build-up of pressure and intensity, and it starts, it grips, and then it releases. So this representation that you might see on some of the monitoring machines, as much as I hate to use that as the example, it's a pretty good indication of how it works. Now, it's not always, especially with your first baby, it's not an intense, immediate pain and then release. It's gradual. It heads up in intensity, and then this part here is the most intense part, is this crescendo, this point that it reaches. Now, this section here probably only lasts around, let's say, 20 seconds. And if we think about that in terms of your whole contraction of 60 seconds, you've still got 20 seconds of it building. And then once it reaches this peak, it starts to ease off. And that's, again, another around 20 seconds if your contractions are 60 seconds long. And again, it's different for everyone. Your contractions might be 40 seconds and more intense, or they might be longer and sort of more spaced out. So it's different for everyone, but I'm going to use this as a generic example. And then I'm going to use this color because this is pretty important. You get a break in between before the next one starts. And this can be around 2 minutes. Again, different for everyone, but I'm going to use this as a bit of a generic guide. So if we think about this time scale, there's only about 20 seconds of your contraction that you have to really keep your shit together. You've got a bit where it builds, you've got this intense section in the middle, and then it starts to release. Then this magical section. Now this break, excuse my whiteboard, this section here is the secret to your labour. It was a secret to all of mine, and this is where you have a big choice to make. You can either decide to get to this section, be really tense, feel the tightening, feel the contraction, get tense, get to this stage where you've got no pain, there's no intensity, where everything's released. You can either start dreading the next one and spend this 2 minutes with your brain in overdrive and your muscles tense and tight, wasting energy, a huge waste of emotional and physical energy if you're tightening your muscles and your mind is racing. Or you can use this 2 minutes of absolute golden time to take a big rescue breath here, do a bit of a body scan, relax your face because that no doubt will be tense, drop your shoulders, drop your belly because no doubt you'll be tensing against your contractions. If you've got some extra skills, hopefully you won't be too tense. Go through your body, relax all of your body, drop your head down, close your eyes. And if you can spend that 2 minutes here in a relaxed state between every contraction, more than half of your labour, the majority of your labour You will be conserving valuable energy, not just physical energy, but mental energy. Because this is all about choice. Whether you cope or not is you can have skills to cope. And those skills can be rescue breath. Birth partners, this is such an important part. Remind the rescue breath, drop the shoulders, do a body scan, relax as much as you can. Release all that tension in between so that you're ready to cope for that next 20 seconds of keeping your shit together. So think about this little segment here, it's just rinse and repeat. And it's being able to keep your mind focused on this, get to this 2 minutes, get to that golden time and relax. Now, with my first labor, I got into such a great rhythm and routine that this 2 minutes I was able to actually fall asleep. And then as soon as I could feel that little rush of endorphins before that contraction, and if you've been breathing really well and managing to get your body in a relaxed state, you'll feel those endorphins kick in. And I thought it was this cruel trick that people made up that, gave you this glimmer of hope that you could cope with labor. I felt this major, like this little endorphin rush. So I'm going to hold my whiteboard up. I felt this sort of rush here of endorphins just before the contraction would start. And that would sort of wake me up. And then I'd start my breathing. And again, get to this 2 minutes of gold and use it wisely. It's one of the most important things you can do during labor. So look, I hope that's given you a bit of an idea about what it can feel like and how you can prepare yourself. And to be honest, this is one of the most important things that I did through my labor. That meant that I had 3 labors with no epidurals, unmedicated. And this gives you some amazing tips for getting through your labor. So hopefully you can approach it with some calm, you can keep those hormones going and get rid of that fear.